Out of the 4 classes in Deep Rock Galactic, I think there's one class in particular that's the best for new miners. This video is going to tell you why I think the Driller is the best class to start with. To start, we're going to quickly go over why I don't think the Engineer or the Scout are very good classes to begin with. Then I'm going to talk about why the Gunner is almost the best class, but not quite, and then wrap up with what sets the Driller apart from the rest. The Engineer and the Scout are 2 classes that I think play off one another perfectly. The Engineer shoots platforms underneath minerals and items in hard to reach places, and the Scout grapples to get them. Unfortunately, they play off each other a little too well. As far as completing collection type mission objectives, you'll be really limited to what you can and cannot collect as a Scout. If there's not an Engineer to make platforms for you, you'll still be able to light up caves with your flare gun for your team and call out things you'll find while grappling around, but you would need to rely on the Gunner's zipline or the Driller to drill a path to things in most circumstances. Veteran Scout players can use their pickaxe power attack to make their own platforms, but this is a more advanced skill that requires practice. The Scout's starting weapons, the Deep Core Assault Rifle and the Jury Rig Shotgun, are familiar starting weapons if you're familiar with first-person shooters, but new persons may have trouble with crowd control until they unlock more modifications on these weapons. You'll need a couple upgrades and some good aim for the weapons to be most effective. In general, the Scout is very middle of the road in effectiveness when it comes to crowd control as well as single target damage, at least until you unlock more perks on the weapons. Don't get me wrong though, grappling around the area is really fun and you can get the Scout out of some tricky situations, but the Scout just isn't self-sufficient enough for players new to the game. The Engineer has the opposite problem. He can make things more accessible to get to, but his movement is limited with the platform cannon. Going down is quick and safe for the Engineer to do because the platforms prevent a lot of fall damage, but it takes a lot of platforms to go up as well as horizontally. In most circumstances, you'll run low on platform ammo, getting to a couple out-of-the-way items as a new player. The Engineer's weapons and kit struggle with crowd control at the start. At first, the sentry turret is probably the best at crowd control in the Engineer's toolkit, since the Engineer's shotgun and grenade launchers both lack the ammo to clear lots of enemies and require reloading often. I found that placing a sentry down at all, let alone knowing good positions to place it, was an extra plate that I wasn't prepared to spin when I first tried the Engineer class. Only after I'd spent a good amount of time in Deep Rock did I start to feel confident enough to properly use the sentry, which is a large part of the class's kit. Both weapons, however, are good options at taking out bigger targets, but the Engineer's starting primary, a shotgun, can only kill a few enemies before needing to be reloaded. It also suffers against tiny enemies because of their small hitboxes. The grenade launcher can make up for some of this, but it doesn't have the necessary ammo reserves. The Engineer is one of the best classes at defending and locking down zones, but most of the time that isn't very necessary and a lot of the Engineer's kit isn't taken advantage of fully. Its greatest strength is also its greatest weakness. Because the kit favors bunkering down, when the Engineer gets swarmed, it's extremely difficult to escape to a better position. For new players that aren't familiar with DRG's enemies and swarms, they'll be quickly overrun and the Engineer won't be as equipped as other classes to prevent you from going down. The Gunner is almost the class I recommend to start with. It's great at crowd control and single target damage. The starting minigun has enough bullets to shred through swarms of enemies that spawn, and enough damage per second to tear through the heavily armored, high health enemies you'll encounter on missions. Gunner has a shield that you can drop that will protect you and your allies from enemies for a couple seconds. It also has a zipline that can carry himself and players across large distances. The zipline can be used to mine materials such as gold for XP and credits and nitro for ammo. The problem with the Gunner's zipline is that you can't collect secondary mission objectives while on the zipline very well or at all. Items that you have to reach out and grab you can't do while on the zipline, and items that you can mine for with your pickaxe are limited due to your reach. The zipline is also a very slow way of escaping when things get too crazy and you need to reposition. You can shoot a zipline, drop a shield, and get onto the zipline, but your escape will be really slow. Of course, if you have the zipline already out, you can get onto it quicker, but melee enemies may still hit you. Ranged enemies will be able to hit you fairly easily since you're moving so slow on the zipline, and if you take too much damage, you'll fall off of the zipline. Falling off the zipline will either cause you to take a lot of fall damage, be swarmed by the enemies you're trying to escape, or both. Despite how slow the zipline moves you, it's a very effective way of avoiding many of the melee enemies thrown at you since they cannot reach you while you're suspended in the air. In my opinion, if the zipline moved you faster and let you get to safety a little bit quicker, the gunner would have been the best starting class. The gunner was so close to being the best starting class due to its ease of use and how well it can handle crowd control and single target damage, but its movement and maneuverability just wasn't good enough compared to the driller in my opinion. So that leaves us with the driller. The driller's flamethrower is very good at crowd control and is decent at single target damage. The flamethrower is able to do pretty good damage against Praetorians, which is a somewhat tanky enemy you'll see, but isn't very good against oppressors, because they have a 66% damage resistance to fire, so the flamethrower isn't very useful against them. That being said, the starting grenade, the impact axe, will make up for some of the loss of the single target damage that other classes do better at. The axe alone will just do under 33% of an oppressor's health, and about half the health of a Praetorian. It can also give a little bit of health back from kills when using the vampire perk. Axes will chunk down the armor of dreadnoughts, which are large boss monsters in the game. They also do a quick burst of damage when you need to reload during the small window you're actually able to do direct damage to a dreadnought. The Sabata, the driller's secondary weapon, does pretty decent single target damage when hitting weak points, is what you should usually be using against oppressors and dreadnoughts. Using the Sabata and the impact axe together will make quick work of Praetorians and oppressors for you, and will do more for you against dreadnoughts than your flamethrower will. All that being said, the driller is noticeably unimpactful during dreadnought fights because other classes will do way more damage. It's not until you get the Cryo Gun that the driller will feel a little bit more useful to the team during these fights. Even with the Cryo Gun, usually the best thing to do during these fights is for you to grab the attention of the dreadnought and lead it away from your team. This will turn the dreadnought's weak point towards your team and allow them to more easily do lots of damage. The satchel charge is basically a C4 that you can drop and detonate remotely. The explosion is great for groups of enemies and is great at removing the armor on dreadnoughts. It shouldn't be used on the dreadnought's actual health though, because of the reduced explosive damage dreadnoughts take when their armor has been broken. The driller's drills are the last item in their toolkits and are great tools for yourself and the team. The drills don't require other classes to be effective, which makes the driller very self-sufficient. You can create a tunnel to a teammate that's gone down. You can shape the terrain to be more advantageous for defending. You can reach most minerals and items by drilling to them, and you can create a safe tunnel back to the drop pod for your team at the end of the mission. There's a lot of things that you can do with the drills to help out your team. For all of these reasons, I think the driller is the best starting class for Deep Rock Galactic. If you want to learn more about the role each class plays for the team during missions, be sure to hit the subscribe button to the channel and check out the video next.